Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. Joining me today is Lisa Zawrotny. Lisa is a productivity strategist, accountability coach, the founder of Positively Productive Systems, and the host of the Positively Living podcast. Lisa holds certifications in time and stress management, life coaching, and positive psychology, and she's helped hundreds of clients do less, live more, and breathe easier. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, Marianne, it's my pleasure. I am so looking forward to this conversation with you.
Me too. This is a really great topic to explore. And before we get into some of the nitty-gritty details of it all, help us understand, how does a person get led through the journey of life to building a profession around all things productivity?
Right. And I know we love the idea of productivity, but I do want to clarify right out of the gate that my version of productivity, the way that I define it, redefine it, if you will, and the way that I want it for you is to do less and live more, right? Not to do more. So we'll get into that in a minute, but I think that is so important because it's the driver behind what I was searching for in my overwhelm. If you have lived survival mode, then I feel you, because that's what I lived. And in particular, I've been in a few of them, but the big one, if you will, what I sort of say is, the beginning of my origin story into becoming a compassionate productivity strategist, right, is being a caregiver for my mom while having my babies. And I mean pregnant with both of my children and having them. And I was caring for my mom who had Alzheimer's. And I say these words to you, and it's been a while now, and it's almost so foreign to me. Like, how did I do that? How did I ever get through that? But as we all know, we get through what we need to get through.
Yeah.
And I came out the other side of it, just barely, mind you, understanding that there has to be a different way. All the things that I thought were so important, the demands that I placed on myself, let alone the demands that I accepted from others, it was time to question that. It was time to do things a different way. I'm so glad that I listened to that voice inside my head, because I came out of it thinking, oh, what do I need to do next? This is what we always do, right? Especially when we go through big life transitions, when we go through big stressors, traumas, things like that. The first thing we think is, what do I need to do? And something inside me said, whoa, how about step back? How about clear out? How about rest? How about
take a minute?
Right? Take a minute, right? Take a break. And I mean, I almost say it in a teasing way, but it's true though. We want to keep going, to keep doing, to keep adding things. And something inside me said, you need a moment. You barely survived this. You need some healing. And I'm so grateful I listened, because it led me to really clearing out my space. And when I say that, I mean my physical space, because I had stuff piled up that I was ignoring. My mental space, because I was overwhelmed and exhausted and unfocused and absolutely like soul weary.
I get that. I can feel that.
Right? Yeah. So it was an opportunity to say, like, make sense of it, go through it. And I think we hesitate to do that, but it's very powerful and healing. And I did it in a way that led me to becoming a professional organizer, because that is the tangible version of it, right? Of decluttering and organizing, making sense of things, figuring out what belongs, resetting, right? All of that. But I figured out immediately, first person, I walked into their home and started talking to them and thought, wow, this is really the head and the heart that's going on here. The head and the heart is what creates the clutter, what is impacted by the clutter. Like it's now I have the phrase, our environments affect and reflect our internal, right? So the internal and external play together. I understand that now, but in that moment I could see that there was this connection and I wanted to learn more. And that brought me into essentially productivity coaching, because it's about the grief and the trauma and the habits and the connection to our space and to our lives, the obligations, everything that swirls around us, especially as women, caregivers, right?
Trying to do it all.
Right. When we address those things and when we address ourselves in the most beautiful and compassionate way, let me tell you, the rest of it, the clutter, actually fixes itself.
So two things you said that I want to go back to.
Yeah.
So one that I think is always worth reiterating, you listened to your intuition or the nuance there that was just telling you something was off and that you needed to take that minute and kind of reframe. So many of us for so long ignore those whispers or our intuition that's trying to tell us all along what we should be doing, but we ignore it, right? And usually, like in your story, something major happens to make us take that minute, take that pause, and finally hear a little bit louder what we're being told.
Yeah.
So I like to pull that out because I just want to keep reminding the listeners, listen to those little whispers in your life. They're there, the signs are there. And then the second thing, you said that the pressure we put on ourselves is often worse than the people around us or the environment around us and the pressures they put on. And I couldn't agree more. And it's a great segue into the area that you and I wanted to focus on. For the listeners, as a reminder, I always do a connection call with a potential guest. And you and I very quickly came to the thought that let's focus more around the mental clutter and less around the physical clutter, because I think there's a million people out there talking about the physical clutter. And as you know, the mental is often much more impactful. And of course, they play into each other, but I don't think there's enough talk and there's enough tangible action around what does that mental clutter look like? What does that mean? How do we try to step through it or out of it? And I thought maybe you could share some of that with our listeners. So can we start with a sort of one-on-one definition for people that are listening? What does that mean?
Yeah, I love that. And recently someone asked me if, the work that I do is actually more mental, and which of course made me giggle, I was like, yep. But in all seriousness, it really is what's going on inside. And you think about even on the physical side of things, like an episode of Hoarders, right? What's one of the first things they do is bring in, someone to deal with the trauma, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's so important so they have therapy with regard to that. And what's really cool is that all the things that you hear about physical clutter, the work that I've done with physical clutter, the principles can be applied in the same way. So along those lines, I actually love a quote from a physical declutterer, a professional organizer, Peter Walsh. Okay. He says that clutter is not just the stuff on your floor. It's anything that stands between you and the life you want to be living.
Wow, that's good.
Right? I'm like, wish I'd thought of that. No, I use that for years. Peter Walsh is going to come and be like, hey, you've been yes, because that's it right there. And so what I love about that concept, and this is overarching, right? So any kind of clutter that you have, any kind of things that you have in your life.
Yeah, that's where my mind went. It could be anything.
Anything.
It could be people. It could be anything.
Yes, I've actually done episodes on my podcast about decluttering. I have done decluttering episodes about physical decluttering, about like decluttering toxic people. It sounds tongue in cheek, but in all seriousness, it's like whatever it is that you have in your life, elements, things.
Yeah.
what belongs that works for you and what is getting in between you and the life you want to be living. And what I love most about that is there are things that we do love. And I'm speaking to you, my crafty creatives and my fellow bibliophiles, that sometimes you can have a large collection of things, let's say, and everyone else sees it as clutter. But it serves you, it energizes you, it fills up your soul, and you love it. And you're like, but it's not.
Yeah.
And so this is how this definition can help you understand when it isn't. Now, if the same collection of things makes it so that you aren't living the life you want to be living, then you need to take a look at it. But that is how I define clutter in general. And so then when we think about mental clutter, okay, you take the definition and you start thinking about aspects of things that are, in our minds, stories, demands, obligations, information overload, the mental load, which I think is especially prevalent for women. We see this. The studies are showing this, right? Even innovative ideas. I work with multi-passionate creatives, and I am one, and we're thinking about new stuff all the time, and bright shiny objects, and hey, I just, had another idea. And those are wonderful things, but they can also be a form of clutter, depending upon the meaning we associate, depending upon how we let it distract us from other things that need to be tended to. Clutter, it's like that double-edged sword, right? That you can have wonderful things that can also be clutter in that they can be distractions. Limiting beliefs, of course, are another one as well. Any kind of intrusive thought. So all of these things, when you have something that's considered clutter, it's going to potentially distract you from where you really need to focus. It may overwhelm you. It may trigger guilt and shame. And all of that, as you can imagine, will contribute to decreased productivity.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is we often say in all of the kind of topics we explore, awareness is always the first step, right? Whether you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to figure out your relationship or you're trying to figure out your profession or whatever, if something's just kind of off, or you're trying to reset your habits and rewire your patterns, you have to be self-aware. And so how does that play into this clutter game or this productivity game? Because I would think it has a pretty big role.
Huge. As a matter of fact, one of my mantras, I guess I would say, is that awareness, self-awareness specifically, is your number one productivity tool, your number one life tool, in my opinion. And actually just did a keynote presentation about self-awareness and the power of it, how it contributes to, our understanding, our habit development, our self-confidence. And again, you can imagine, okay, so that's all very positive developmental stuff. And then we think about things like clutter that detracts from that. So you can see how they're definitely going to play together. The other thing about self-awareness that I think is so incredibly important is that we identify key things in our lives, such as our core values, the things that need to be in our lives, that must belong in order for us to be satisfied and happy and truly productive. When we identify those things, we have created the filters that we will then use for decluttering. Right? It's just like saying you have a room in your home. This is what the use is. This is how we want to use it.
Yeah.
You identify that first. This is what matters to us. It is going to connect to your values. And I'll use a physical example. In our dining room, you would be like, okay, so you're going to gather together. It's important for you to have the family gatherings. This is part of your core values. And so what do you need in there in order to have that happen? But a classic example for our family is also that we love to do puzzles and games, and it would also happen in that room. So it's like you get to choose, you get to identify. And that's the same thing for the space in your life, in your heart, in your calendar, and in your mind. What do you want to fill that space with? what is going to soothe you and energize you and make you your best self, what belongs. Self-awareness, right, is your starting point to create those filters to then actually more easily decide. Once you do that work, that's why I love what you talk about here when you're saying, okay, let's understand ourselves first, because when you do take that effort, right?
Yeah.
And do that work, because I know it's footwork, I know it's pre-work, I know it's homework. I know work sounds like a bad word, but you are essentially priming your productivity. You are creating the information, or you're uncovering really, or discovering the information you need to make those choices. It'll make it that much easier.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that until a couple episodes ago. And I was having a conversation with someone else talking about how your values, if you are really strongly aligned and really understand what they are, then it's pretty easy to go yes or no, or this belongs or it doesn't.
Yeah.
For many years, I ran teams and we built 3-year strategies or whatever. And as you start looking at and you're putting together that picture of what that looks like, one of the exercises you can always do is, if you know where you're going and you know what you're trying to build out of that team, and something comes up for you to work on and you have a decision to make, you're always like, does this fit into where I'm going? Does this fit into the strategy? Right? And you can easily look at that list and go, nope, this isn't going to give them the skills. This isn't going to, whatever it is, generate the revenue.
Yeah.
It's very similar. If you have that very specific, clear picture of what your values are, what that means to you in your personal life, then if we go back to the idea of cluttering or decluttering, it makes it much easier to make decisions based on where your values are. Do I want to spend my time doing this thing or that thing? Do I want to fill my space with this thing or that thing? Does it align with my values? It's interesting because I don't know that I ever thought about my values really having an impact on cluttering and decluttering, especially the mental clutter.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about it now, I just did an episode about traveling and whether I should plan or not plan, and how in the past I've been really obsessed with over planning. And you know what? I don't value that anymore. I don't value wasting all that time planning. And now that I'm really clear on that, I chose not to do it. So I totally can relate to that now and understand what you're saying.
Absolutely. And that alignment, it makes you just said it, the yeses and the nos, and every yes is a no, probably multiple no's, and every no is a yes. And so it's making that informed decision and making that intentional choice. And so then when you come back to the mental clutter, now it's like, okay, what do you have in your brain and what belongs, and is it blocking you?
Yeah.
From showing up your best, from doing the things that you want to do, from being innovative and creative, from, taking care of things that matter. And so you can place this in so many different ways. I work a lot with clients on the to-do lists and the calendars and things like that, because so often our tendency is to hold that information in our heads. Right. Oh, I'll remember that, but then what do? You're spending all that time and energy trying to not forget the thing.
Yeah.
You are not fully present.
Yeah.
And when you're not fully present, then your kids are like, you're not paying attention to me. What is going on here? Or you're feeling guilty. You're feeling pulled, in different directions. You are maybe not innovating as much as you could. You're maybe not doing the things that you want to do. I mean, you can see the connection, right, to so many aspects of mental clutter and how we lose out.
Yeah. What do you suggest? So I had somebody actually message me this morning, and it's a topic that we've explored before, and it's timely because we're coming up on the holidays.
Yep.
And I'm certainly anybody listening knows this, I'm a recovering over planner, perfectionist, crazy, about all the things. And somebody messaged me and was like, I'm starting to stress about the holidays already. The thoughts that can be overwhelming about, I got to do all the things. I gotta get all the shopping done. I don't know what to get people. Am I going to get the house decorated right? Am I going to be able to fit it all in? Just all the things. Do you have any suggestions for people to sort of, because you can't necessarily write that down and make it go away, because some of it maybe you can, but I guess that's my question. What's a good suggestion for somebody to start handling that in a different way so they don't keep spinning in their head for the next 2 months?
I'm so glad you asked when you were like, do you have any suggestions? I'm like, I have all the suggestions. Okay, so let's lean in and stay with me, but we're going to keep it as simple as possible. I don't ever want the solution to feel like it's more overwhelming than the thing that you're actually dealing with. So let's keep it simple. To your point about writing things down, yes, that's a good starting point, because one of the things is you spin through these thoughts of, oh my gosh, it's November, and that means 2 more months. And so, okay, wait. So then we have Thanksgiving, and then what are we doing for Thanksgiving again? Okay, now who's going where? Now, but then there's going to be Christmas. Oh my God, I have to start. Okay, so then do I get the gifts, and then I'll plan the. Oh wow, wait, have I checked the circulars to see what we're? Yeah, okay, so.
Wait, you guys, I'm cracking up and I'm holding my head because, okay, not this year, but go back 5 years. That's me every year. Yeah. So I can relate.
So a starting point is actually writing down what's coming up, what holidays do we have, when are people off, where are we going? So actually laying out kind of open up a Google Doc and start like a Thanksgiving document and one that's, for whatever holiday that you're celebrating. If you celebrate Christmas or something around that time frame, when people are going to have breaks and things like that. So lay that out first. Now, some systems we can have in place that I might recommend now for later, and this is again something that I coach so much and help with, is the idea of starting, and even right now, it's okay to start it right this moment, and then by next year, it's going to be even better. Open up the Notes app on your phone and start listing out people you do want to give gifts to. That's easy for me to say. And, write stuff down as you think of it. And then what I have is I actually have a capture that I use throughout the year. So when I see something or someone says something to me, I pop open the app and write it in there. So capturing it out of your head and into, a safe space is going to be an answer to most of these issues. That it will get you most of the way. And now we'll take a quick opportunity for me to mention one of my favorite productivity principles out there. The Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle, means that you can get 80% of the way to whatever goal you have, whether that's planning Thanksgiving or figuring out gift buying or, working on a house project, whatever it is, you can get 80% of the way that you need to go with only 20% of the input, the effort, the resources. A way to think of that is your closet, okay? 80% of what you wear, the majority of what you wear is probably only about 20% of that closet.
That's valid.
Right? That is so valid. I feel seen. I feel called out all at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the good news is, when you are, running a business, let's say 80% of your income is probably going to be about 20% of your clients, or you're working with a volunteer staff. 80% of the work's probably being done by about 20% of the volunteers. Sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 90-10, but this ratio, this leveraging tool here is magical because now I want you to apply it to your values for the holiday season. For example, when I say, and I'll actually use it as a verb now with my family, what's the 80-20 for our Thanksgiving together? One is that we're all hanging out, that it's mellow and not stressful, and that there's turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes. And the gravy comes with it. Okay. You'll notice I didn't mention any fancy desserts. Okay. My mother-in-law does some great pies, so we're good with that. I think crescent rolls probably have to be on that list. Okay. In fairness. But the point is that there wasn't any kind of wild and amazing and hours long side dish or dessert thing. There wasn't anything. I didn't mention a thing about decorations. or centerpieces. I didn't mention a thing about like necessarily who's going to be there or has to be there. I didn't even mention like dishes or how the tablescape is going to be. And year to year, we have allowed that to be flexible, right? Because we get the 80-20 of it, which is the awesome turkey and watching the parade on TV and, sort of like that clock turning to be like, okay, and now I'm allowing it to be the Christmas season because I'm a stickler about that. But again, that's our values and what we want. We want it to be quiet and mellow. We don't want to feel that stress. And so that's what we focus on. So you'll notice how much of that, there are some particular things that are very important to us that I want, but the rest of the how is very open.
Yeah.
That's what I would say, is come up with the real key things. I've done this in years past when I felt extremely overwhelmed, where it's like, okay, if the tree is up and we have some garland lights around, because twinkle lights, that is the thing for me. For the twinkle lights, some, warm beverage, probably of the cocoa persuasion, and Hallmark movies. Boom, I'm done. Holiday season.
Hallmark movies, you just won me over. I mean,
right?
That is my jam.
Right?
Even though you know exactly how they're going once you're 10 minutes in, you know the whole story. But it's okay. It's just a warm feeling and it's all.
Exactly. It's the coziness so that's what I'm after. When you understand that 80-20, when you understand or when you understand really that core aspect of whatever it is that you want to get out of it, you're like, in the end, this is how I want to feel. This is who I want to be with. This is what I want to experience. That what and the who, you focus on that, and then you let the how play out.
I really love that. And I've really put that into practice in the last few years. I didn't know that principle specifically and didn't do that exercise, but really, really have shifted into saying, that's just not worth worrying about. It's not going to matter at the end of the day. These are the things we really care about. So it's similar.
It is.
But I love for somebody that's just starting out on this journey of self-reflection and trying to do some transformation to have a very tangible exercise that they can say and put through their, go through it in their head and say, where does this come in on that 80-20? Like what's the most important?
Right. What will get us most of the way there? And may I encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're like, ooh, this is a neat idea. But one of the things that can hold us back is the expectation of others. And when we talk about self-awareness, I just did a presentation on that self-awareness and specifically Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies. And one of the tendencies of the 4, so I'll just tell you, because I know if you're listening right now and you're like, what are the 4? Tell me. Yeah. So upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. And without making this like a 4 tendencies chat, we can always have another conversation about that. I will tell you that it has to do with inner and outer expectations and how we show up. And so that's why I like it as a framework for habit development, because habits coaching is a big part of what I do. And so upholders reasonably balance inner and outer well. Rebels are like, neither. So they have to look to a different motivation to get things done. Questioners are all internal. I have to understand it. And obligers, the reason I bring this up is because obligers, which are probably the biggest portion of the population. Yes, it's the people pleasers. It's the ones who need that outer accountability. They show up for others. And it's not that the other categories aren't also selfless givers, but the obligers are special in that in order to get what they want, they have to serve others in what they want as well. I bring this up because there's an important bit of clarity here. When you're figuring out the 80-20, let's say for this holiday season, talk to the people that you normally show up for, that you normally give up what matters to you for them, and be very clear on what matters to them. Because too many times I have seen clients and loved ones drag themselves through the holiday mud to the point of weariness to create something that they thought others wanted that really didn't matter. I know you're nodding.
Totally
you get it, right?
Ask them.
So ask them. They may surprise you because they'll be like, my kids, and I've done this with my family too. They're like, our crescent roll is going to be on the table.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now I know what's important to you. In all seriousness, it will, I surprise you and amaze you and maybe delight you how little they need for what really matters. That goes into love languages. It goes into motivation, and it goes into what makes them, oh, it feels like Christmas when, or what's really important on my birthday is.
Yeah. This came up, we had a conversation around complicated mother-daughter relationships. And the topic of asking your children really is so insightful because, especially if you have grown children, right?
Yeah.
You can ask them, what about the holidays really made it special for you or really stands out for you? And I'm with you. I bet, and I was this I'll say crazy person going around for years and years and years and making it so the prep so focused on getting it all perfect, quote unquote perfect, guys, that sometimes it can get where it's not fun anymore, right? You're driving the kids nuts. You're like, don't live in the house basically because you don't want anything to get dirty or whatever it is, right? So I think that check-in and getting really clear about, they probably don't care about half those things. And you are driving yourself and them crazy.
Yeah.
And really, none of it's necessary in the end.
Mm-hmm. You're so right. And here's the converse of that, or, that's really wonderful and positive, is that when you place yourself in a situation where you haven't put as many demands on, and this is something that really matters to them, you show up differently for that. You're going to be more present and more pleasant and and it's just like, a happiness feedback loop. And it doesn't, even just describing it, like, feels better, right? Makes you breathe easier.
100%. And for somebody that's been there and now is living in a different spot. And again, I'll say recovering, because I think you, at least for me, always have the tendencies to be able to go back there if you don't pay attention. Oh yeah. It feels so different. I mean, it's just a completely different experience, life in general, but also things like the holidays. It really is freeing. I think you don't, until you do that, you don't know how freeing it really can be.
Absolutely. Love that.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about how confidence or lack of self-confidence plays into any of this.
Okay. So when we deal with self-confidence or esteem issues, right? Things that play into that are important for us to know. Like, let's call it the components that impact it. Right? If we think about those things, we can think about sort of where they come from, as well as things that we can do to kind of build yourself back up. So action and skill development, self-awareness, we talked about this already. As soon as you're self-aware, that can actually build your confidence, because self-awareness can lead to self-acceptance.
Yes.
It's way too easy for us to be like, oh my God, why am I not doing this thing? I am so lazy. I'm so this, we get these thoughts, right, in our head based on something that we're not doing, when I've had this so many times, and it's a wonderful experience for me as a coach to say, well, of course that habit didn't work for you, Marianne. This is how you work best, and you're trying to do something that's the complete opposite. And then you go, oh,
that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, it's a mind blown moment kind of thing. Yeah. It's like, oh no, wait, I'm not problematic. Can't do habits, lazy, got issues. I'm not these things.
It's just the wrong fit.
It's the wrong fit. It's the wrong tool. I live in my home in a sea of ADHD. That's what I call it. And I have so many conversations with them about, your mind is differently built. Okay. Yes. And you have your superpowers, and you have your places that are your blind spots or your challenges. We figure out the right tools for the job. You are unstoppable. So it doesn't matter how you're wired. It's figuring out how you're wired. Yes. That can then lead to your self-acceptance, and also your confidence in saying, oh, okay, I get it now. When I work in this way, that's going to be a struggle. But when I work this way, Now I'm kicking butt and taking names. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the idea of boundaries, right? When we lean into comparison and when we don't understand, you talked before about values and knowing like, ooh, this is what I want. This is what I say yes and no to. You need that information in order to create proper boundaries.
That's a hard one for people.
Yes. And I get that. But, may I offer, I think, is it Mark? I can't remember if it's Groves or Graves. It was like boundaries, don't put up a wall, but essentially show people where the door is. That's a paraphrase. I probably
like
butchered the quote,
though.
but yeah, but the concept, the visual is you're not putting up a wall. You're not serving others. This is especially true for caregivers and nurturers and obligers. That's not what it is. You're showing them where the door is and maybe your office hours. You know what I mean? You need the time for you. So yeah, your confidence is greater when you can show people where the door is. The other way I like to describe boundaries is the idea of them showing people how to love you best.
I like both of those. I really love the door because, like you said, it's tangible. And I think we often think boundaries, they're going to be negatively received and they feel people are nervous about setting them if they've never done it before. But I love the idea of you're not blocking them out. You're not building a wall. You're just putting the door in a certain spot. Or like you said, telling them what hours they can come to visit. And you're not making it off limits. Maybe you're saying, no, I can't do that this time. Or maybe I'll do, I can do it next week and not this week, whatever it is.
Do you want my favorite people pleaser phrase? It's 6 words, and I absolutely adore them. When you're used to the knee-jerk reaction of saying yes, not having the boundaries, right? Wanting to do the thing, okay? I'm not saying not to. I'm saying first you say, let me get back to you.
Yeah, take a pause.
Take a pause. Take a moment. And then the idea too is that with this boundary, right, whatever you're creating, I want to be realistic here and I want to honor you if you're like, oh my gosh, if I try doing this, if I'm new at this, there's going to be backlash. And I want to tell you, you're actually right. There can be. And it's okay. Because people don't like change because people are used to things. Sometimes it's because they've been taking too much and they know. Other times it's just, I'm not used to this. Wait a minute. Is this the new rule now? So think of it in terms of change and the fact that people need to get used to it. So when you have a change in the rules, you post the rules, you communicate the rules. This is what you do with the people that you love when you need to adjust your boundaries. Say something, say it in a way that is loving, that says, think about it like translating it to, you can do what's best for me by doing this thing or not doing this thing or doing this thing at this time. I will show up my best for you when, reframe it in a way where it's like, okay, I'm still going to serve you. I'm still going to love you, but I want to show up my best. And here's what I need to do that.
I like that. And I like acknowledging that it could get uncomfortable and there could be backlash. And it's also partly because people are used to what you let them, I'll say, get away with, or, how you built that relationship. So of course, to your point, when you start making changes, it's going to feel uncomfortable and you have to reset expectations. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Just know it could be coming and realize it's okay.
Yeah. And for most people, as I said, there can be the exceptions, there can be the takers and things like that. But for most people, they're like, oh, I didn't realize you needed that. Oh, no. Okay. That's fine.
Yes.
If they understand, they want to support you. So communication is key here.
I really like that. So this might take us a little bit out of the mental clutter space, but I want to ask a question just in general.
Sure.
Why do you think most productivity systems fail us?
I think the simplest response would be that they're not customized. They don't know you. It actually really drives me nuts. I'm on a soapbox about this daily when I see the claims that are being made because they prey on your desire to 10x your productivity. What am I 10xing? And what do you mean? And how do you know? Listen, I'm not that great at math, but I know that you're going to need a baseline before you can understand things. I think it's because they are not customized. And what I even mean by that in more detail is that they're not specific to you and they don't have enough holistic understanding of what productivity will really mean for you. That actually circles back to what I said in the beginning of maybe it's doing less, but living more and achieving more. We focus too much on the tail end of the productivity idea from the Industrial Revolution times, right? Where we're like, let's do more in a shorter amount of time. How are we going to be efficient? How are we going to streamline? It's very like hard skill related. And I'm bringing the soft skills to it because without that context, without that compassion, you're going to get something done possibly, but at what cost? And how long is it going to last? I'm all for sustainable and within a context that's actually going to feel like so much more achievement and so much more satisfying when you do it that way.
I love that because it ties into so much of the conversation around how we've been wired to be productive and our value, our self-value, our self-judgment very often is tied to productivity, generic productivity, right? Like I've lived this too. It's what do I do next? How do I achieve? How do I show up? That becomes who you are.
Yep.
And your value gets tagged to only if you're being productive.
Right.
And I think, taking that to your point, really unwinding that and looking at the soft side of it and really looking at the being self-aware. How does it fit into your life? What really is going to fill you up? Where do you really bring value? Because it's really not about all the doing.
Exactly.
Such a great conversation. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom. I'm going to ask you one more question before I let you go. And that is, what surprises you the most in this space?
When you say in this space, please clarify.
All things productivity.
What surprises me the most? I think it would be how these very, very simple principles, right? Things that we think couldn't possibly matter. Taking the tiniest steps, understanding ourselves just a little bit more can have such a huge impact. And I celebrate it every single day.
Huge impact. Often the things we can leverage for the biggest change are very simple.
Yeah.
They're not always easy to employ in your life on a regular basis, but the concepts are usually pretty simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is probably why we look past some of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Habits are a great example where we're like, oh, what will 10 minutes get me? What will that small little step matter? And it's like, oh, you would be surprised. Let's do this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. And I will put all of your links in the show notes. And guys, remember to check her out on the podcast, Positively Living. I know myself, I did a lot of listening and there's tons of tangible hints in there and tons of tangible actions that you can take from listening to that, depending on what area you're interested in. But definitely check it out. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Marianne. It was my absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.